Sure, I'll call roll.
Thanks, Ron.
Rick Hildebrandt,
I'm here.
you're here. Chapinelli,
Here.
David Kader,
Here.
Evan Eiler, Gail Falk,
Present.
Matthew Greenberg,
Sorry, present.
Peter Ireland, Suzanne Jones,
I'm here.
Pat King, vacation, Stephanie Lawrence, Ian O'Digi,
He's on.
he's on, yep. Yep. Dawn Philibert,
I'm here.
you're here. Judy Scott,
She's here.
I think she's here, yep,
I see her.
yep,
Yes,
Margaret-
I'm here, sorry.
that's okay. Margaret Tando, no Margaret. Robert Tortolani,
Here.
Scott Tucker,
Here.
Megan Campbell,
Here.
Kurt Kuehl,
Present.
Bill Reynolds, coming late, Justin Sheng,
I'm here.
Scott Frenier,
I'm here.
Tracy Hayes.
Here.
Oh, here, great. David is here. Paula Nenninger.
Here.
Okay, and me. I think that's it.
So I
Well,
think
you-
in this,
Miss me.
And I joined late.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've got you.
and we have Dr. Eiler and Dr. Ireland as well that have joined.
Oh,
I
great.
believe.
And my name wasn't called. It's Gatus.
Yes,
Dr.
I've
Gates.
got you, Dr. Gatus. Thanks.
Okay. We're at 24. Great. Sorry, let me pull up my thing here. Is there any guests to acknowledge? Hearing none. Is there any public comment? No public comment. Okay, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from the August 7th board meeting. And if you all have had a chance to review those, I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Move to approve. Eiler.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Rents.
Great. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions or recusals? Great. Board issues. I do not have any board issues to bring up or discuss today that I'm aware of, unless, David, you know of something I was planning on bringing up? I don't think so.
I don't, nope. Shall I move on to the administrative update, Rick?
Yes, why don't we move on to the administrative update? Thank you.
Okay.
David.
So my first item is an agenda change, and the other business item that we had today, we were planning on having a visit with a couple of representatives of the naturopath community to talk about their education and training relative to the technical advisory group that is being conducted by the health department, and that we've been asked to provide input on. I was expecting they were going to be able to make it as of last week when we had to send the agenda out, but they were not able to make it. So we're going to have a streamlined meeting today. So, and I'll also, one other note, we have a 12:15 hearing for two stipulations that are going to be presented. So we'll keep an eye on the clock. We opened up the position renewal, which happens every 2 years. At the end of August, beginning of September of even numbered years. As of August 30th, we had 5,815 MD licensees, which is by far a record, really increasing the number of licensees at unprecedented rates the last few years. 4,507 of those had obtained their license through the regular pathway with the board, and 1,308 of them had obtained their license through the IMLC. And as of yesterday, we had 301 submissions from those who had gotten their license through the regular pathway, and 52 who had gotten their license through the IMLC. So we're off at a good clip. And for most of our licensees are probably familiar with it, having gone through themselves, but I'll just say for everybody's benefit, there are 90 days for between when we open the window and when licenses expire on the last day of November at midnight. And it's actually a little bit more because we opened it up on the Friday. So people had an extra day this year, I think. And we ask everybody to have their completed renewals in 15 days in advance of the last day in November in order to give us time to guarantee that we can process them. So every time we pray and hope that we're going to have people get on this early and not wait until the last minute. And one other note is that Central will be meeting in person at 9 a.m. on September 13 at the Department of Lottery and Liquor Conference Room in Vermont, in Berlin, where we've met before. And South is going to meet in person at noon on September 18th in our usual location at the State Office Building in Rutland. And the one other thing I wanted to mention, and I thought our new employee was going to be on, Marcy Quinlan, but we were thrilled to have another employee on board. We finally were able to fill the position for an additional administrative service technician to help Tracy and Kelly. And she hit the ground running and has been with us for 2+ weeks now, and it's going well.
Tracy, did you have a comment or question?
I did. I would just like to ask for anybody who has not submitted their expense accounts through June of 2024, if we could please get those done ASAP so that the business office could close out the fiscal year, please.
Thank you very much for that reminder.
Thank you.
Dr. Kader.
I have a question for David. When are we due to submit our comments on the naturopath question?
Well, that committee is, they're supposed to have, I don't, there's a timeline, there's a deadline in the statute that created that technical advisory group, but there's an internal timeline that I'm not really conversant about with the Department of Health, but it's pretty close to the October board meeting. I guess that we're going to plan to have them come to the October meeting. That you raise a good point. It may be a little bit tight there in order to get our any kind of input to the technical advisory group.
So they're going to come next month, and then we have a couple of days to turn around and give comments.
I think that we're probably going to need to have the discussion after they present because the November meeting, I believe, would be too late.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, let's hope they don't no-show. Otherwise, we'll just have to make comments without their input.
Yes. And I am going to be attending a meeting of the technical advisory group next Tuesday, and I believe they're going to be on that, so I can make an outline of what they present and send that out to members, sort of to try and front load the information in advance of the discussion in October. But I made clear to them that that the goal wasn't to get my input. The goal was to get the input from the board. And if they wanted to provide you more information about education and training that would address concerns about whether or not they should be participating in those processes that we've talked about before, the end of life process and the DNR cost orders, et cetera, that it would be good for them to present it to you.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, thanks, Rick. This is for David. You mentioned that at 12:15, which is coming up, we have two stipulation, I think, consent to go over. We approved something at the licensing committee today. We have to wait a month for that to go before the board.
No, that's one of them.
No, that will be a third item, actually. Yes, that's a good point, Bob. Thank you for raising that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
All right. Dr. Eiler?
I am planning to recuse on one of the stipulations. And I'd sort of like to beam out while that one is going on. If someone could let me know, it's the David Scheipel one. If someone could let me know when to beam back in, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. We could do that. And if there's nothing else, we're just about at 12:15, and I think I see Mr. Belcher.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, George.
Hey, George.
Dr. Hildebrand, are you ready to go forward with the two cases that we have?
Yes.
All right. So we're on the record, and both cases are coming from the South Committee. I wonder if we could call the roll of board members who are participating, and either David or Ron, maybe you could call the roll. And if you're participating, you can say present and participating. If you're recusing or abstaining, you can say that as well.
Okay, I can call the roll. I've got the list for the members of North and Central committees. All right, Dr. Eiler, we know is going to abstain, but I'll let you say it on the record.
Yeah, present will recuse from the Scheipel stipulation.
Okay, Dr. Tando is absent. Dr. Gatus,
Present and participating in both.
Dr. King is absent. And Rob Chapanelli.
Present and participating.
And Dr. Greenberg.
Present and participating.
Dawn Philibert.
Present and participating.
Dr. Coder.
Present and participating.
Dr. Ireland.
Same, present, participating.
Judy Scott.
Present and recusing from the Scheipel stipulation. May I ask if that forestalls any questions I might have on that?
Yes. When you recuse, you do not participate in the discussion. And the last member to check on is Gail Falk. I'm sorry, Gail, you were muted.
Present and participating, sorry.
Thank you. And that is the roll.
Great. Thank you, David. So the first matter is Inri Renee Johannesson. The docket number is MPS 031-0323. The date is September 4th, 2024. We're before the Vermont Board of Medical Practice. We're on the record, and the board members who are participating were identified. Mr. Sheng, I see you. Are you presenting this, or is Kurt Kuehl present and participating?
Hi, Judge. This is Kurt Kuehl. I'll be presenting this, Your Honor.
All right. And how about Ed Adrian, attorney for the respondent? Is he present and participating?
No, he's not. I spoke with Ed last week, and he confirmed that neither he nor Dr. Johannesson would be present.
Okay, and Mr. Adrian and the respondent were noticed at today's hearing, is that right?
They were, yes.
All right, thanks. Go ahead, Mr. Kuehl, you can present this.
Okay, yes, this matter concerns Dr. Renee Johannesson, who is a physician who maintains an obstetrics and gynecological practice in West Windsor. The board opened this investigation after receiving information in March of 2023 that indicated Dr. Johannesson may have prescribed medication to a patient based upon the patient's responses to an online questionnaire without first establishing a proper physician-patient relationship. The committee's investigation determined that the patient contacted Dr. Johannesson via a website and completed a dynamic questionnaire that Dr. Johannesson then used to conduct her evaluation of the patient and ultimately issue a prescription. Dr. Johannesson appeared before the committee during the investigation and admitted that she did not conduct an in-person or synchronous audio-visual evaluation of the patient prior to issuing the prescription. Dr. Johannesson explained that she was unaware of the Vermont law, which provides that issuing a prescription based upon an online questionnaire is inadequate for the initial evaluation when a patient prescribes a medication. The board's policy on the use of telemedicine advises that a physician-patient relationship must be established via synchronous or asynchronous telemedicine technology without a prior in-person visit, so long as the standard of care is met. Now, unlike most medical procedures, the standard of care for establishing a physician-patient relationship via telemedicine is established by statute. And the statute at issue here is Title 26, Section 1359, subsection A33B. And it provides, among other things, that a patient's responses to an online questionnaire alone is inadequate for an initial evaluation when a physician is going to prescribe medication. Dr. Johannesson cooperated with the investigation, provided the information that was requested of her, and conceded that she didn't comply with that statute, and explained that her noncompliance was unintentional and it was the result of her being unaware of that statute. And after considering, the medical records related to the patient encounter, as well as the information provided by Dr. Johannesson in writing, and as well as her appearance before the committee concluded that an appropriate sanction for her conduct here is a reprimand and an administrative penalty of $1,000. The proposed sanction here is consistent with that imposed by the board in its only other matter addressing this particular statute. In that case was Vishal Verma, MPC 0140220, and in that case, it also, the board also imposed a reprimand and a monetary penalty although the monetary penalty there was a higher value because there's more than one violation involved. And so the committee proposes that the board approve this stipulation and impose a sanction of a reprimand for her conduct, as well as a $1,000 administrative penalty. If you have any questions, I certainly will entertain them.
Dr. Ireland?
Can I ask what the medication that was prescribed was?
Yeah, so I'm a bit constrained about what I can speak about. When we present stipulations, I'm really confined to what the parties have agreed to. Although I have spoken with opposing counsel, and I can disclose that the medication that was prescribed was a single-use, non-controlled prescription medication, a one-time non-controlled medication.
Okay.
Ms. Filbert?
Yes, question about legal process. The agenda says stipulation and consent order. Are the penalties that Kurt just presented, are those considered a stipulation and consent order?
Yeah, so the stipulation is the agreement between the state and the doctor.
Okay.
And she has agreed that if the board finds it appropriate, that it can issue the order, which is the consent order. She consented to the order. So
Okay.
if the board agrees, then that will be the order imposed.
Thank you, Kurt.
Any other questions for Mr. Kuehl? Ms. Scott?
How do physicians typically learn about this requirement?
Well, that's there is a board policy on it. It's frankly up to the physicians to be aware of what the requirements are for practice and what the laws are. So David might be able to speak if there are any guidelines provided, or if that is included in the CME requirements. I'm not sure about that.
Sure, if I may, Mr. Belcher.
Sure.
Yes, the board, after the publication of the policy, the board sent out at least one email to all licensees and so letting them know about the policy, which includes reference to the statute in question. And we previously, statute has been in place since 2011, and the board has sent out a number of notices over the years at different times when we've issued policies or just with information about prescribing.
Thank you.
Dr.
And-
Kadir, did you have a question?
I do. Two-part question, I guess. I'm assuming when you said that no synchronous contact between, I'm assuming that would involve a phone call. So I'm assuming there was no phone call, telephone contact between the physician and the patient. And secondly, correct, thank you. And secondly, was there a documented medical record?
Yes,
as a
there
result
was.
of this?
There was, but to your first question, there was no synchronous. There was no telephone call.
Any other questions for Mr. Kuehl? If there are no other questions, does a board member have a motion regarding the proposed stipulation and consent order?
I will move that the presented stipulation and consent order be approved by the board. Philibert.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Scott.
Thank you. Is there a discussion? There's no discussion, then Mr. Herlihy, could I get you to call the roll, and when your name is called, please vote yes or no or aye or nay
Sure.
on the motion.
Dr. Eiler,
Reluctantly vote yes.
Dr. Gatus,
Yes.
Rob Chapanelli,
Yes.
Dr. Greenberg,
I'm going to abstain.
Don Philibert,
Aye.
Dr. Coder,
Yes.
Dr. Ireland,
I'd abstain.
Judy Scott,
Yes.
and Gail Falk.
Reluctantly, yes.
Did we miss anyone in the roll call?
I skipped over the individuals who are absent. But otherwise, everybody was, and those who we did not skip anybody.
All right, thank you. So the motion passes by majority vote, and that will approve the stipulation and consent order. It's prepared for Dr. Hildebrandt's signature, and that will be submitted to him. Unless there's further questions or issues about that matter, we'll move on to the next. So the next matter is In re David Schipel, MD. The docket number is MPS 0430421. And Dr. Eiler, is this the matter that you were abstaining from?
Yeah, I'm gonna beam out for about 10 minutes while you all do this case. I don't think I should participate in this one.
I'll send you an email.
Thank you.
All right, and Judy Scott, the same for you, is that right?
Yes, I won't participate either. And I will
All right.
refuse.
All right, thank you. So we'll understand that all the other members whose names were called previously are participating. And we're on the record. Mr. Kuehl, you're presenting this matter, is that right?
I am, Judge, yes.
And is Mr. Zawistowski, the respondent's lawyer, is he participating?
No, I spoke with John and he indicated that neither he nor Dr. Scheipel would be appearing today.
And they were both noticed of today's hearing, is that right?
Indeed, they were.
All right. If you're ready, go ahead, Mr. Kuehl.
Okay. This one will be a bit of a longer presentation. It involves an eye surgery, which for a layperson such as me is a bit complicated. So I will apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. But Dr. Scheipel is an ophthalmologist who practices in Burlington, and the board opened this case in April of 2021 after it received a complaint from a patient who alleged that Dr. Scheipel did not treat him appropriately and when he removed sutures and managed his intraocular pressure after he had a corneal transplant. The patient alleged that as a result of Dr. Scheipel's conduct, he suffered damage to his optic nerve that ultimately resulted in blindness to his right eye. The patient here, the complainant, suffered an injury in a farming accident in 1955 and to his right eye. And he, 2 years later, in 1957, he had a cataract removed from that eye. He didn't have functional vision in his right eye until he received an intraocular lens implant in 1997, about 40 years later, and then a subsequent penetrating keratoplasty or corneal transplant. And that improved his vision in his right eye to about 20/40. So about 20 years after that, in November 2017, the patient had surgery in Philadelphia, and he had an iris implant. He had a sutured intraocular lens and another corneal transplant in his right eye. That doctor, Dr. Ayers in Philadelphia, prescribed at the time prednisolone, which is a steroidal medication, and directed the patient to apply it to his eye 4 times per day following the surgery. This was tapered after the surgery, and during follow-up examinations with Dr. Ayers, the patient was noted to have an elevation of interocular pressure, pressure within his eye, which I may call it IOP if I slip up. And so as a result of that, he was prescribed Combigan, which is a medication. He was prescribed to take that twice a day, and that medication reduces the pressure in your eye, and it is designed to avoid damage to the optic nerve. At the patient's postoperative examination in December of 13th of 2017, Dr. Ayers noted that the patient had elevated interocular pressure in his right eye, and it was likely caused by the steroidal medications that he was prescribed. And the steroidal medications are prescribed to prevent rejection of the transplant. And so Dr. Ayers at that time further noted that the Combigan, the drug to reduce the IOP, could be discontinued in the future when the steroidal medications was tapered. But he advised that the patient should continuing using some topical steroids to reduce the risk of rejection from the second transplant. Because the patient lived here in Vermont, in Chittenden County, Dr. Ayers requested that he establish with a local ophthalmologist to have care available to him locally, rather than having to travel to Philadelphia for treatment. And so the Dr. Scheifel first saw the patient in March of 2018. And at that time, they discussed the removal of the sutures from the transplant, and as well as the management of his interocular pressure, which at the time was 23. And an ideal interocular pressure is low to mid-teens, somewhere between 10 and 15 is roughly what the ophthalmologist will say is ideal. So it was elevated at that time. And when Dr. Scheifel saw the patient, he noted that he was only taking the Combigan, which is the pressure reducing medication. He was only taking it once per day rather than twice per day as prescribed by Dr. Ayers. And he discussed that with the patient, and also discussed the use of topicals that can cause an elevated IOP. Dr. Scheifel advised the patient that he was at risk for glaucoma given his multiple surgeries, trauma, aniridia, and recommended that the patient follow up with Dr. Ayers regarding any adjustments to his medications, whether they're steroidal or pressure lowering medications, when he was meeting with Dr. Ayers about 6 weeks later. In April of 2018, Dr. Scheipel wrote to Dr. Ayers. This was, about I guess about three days or so after he met with the patient, and he wrote to Dr. Ayers and noted his concern about the patient's elevated IOP, and as well as some testing, optical coherence tomography (OCT) testing of the nerve fiber layer, and he noted that the patient was on he also noted the patient was on prednisolone, but Dr. Scheipel didn't perform another OCT test, for a couple of years after that, until August of 2020. And so that was in the April 2018 appointment with Dr. Scheipel. The patient next met with Dr. Scheipel. Strike that. So fast forward to May of 2018, about a month later, the patient met with Dr. Ayers. Dr. Ayers noted that his optic nerve generally looked good, and generally he seemed to be recovering well. The patient next saw Dr. Scheipel in February of 2019. And the patient at that time said, well, he preferred that Dr. Scheipel remove the remaining sutures from his transplant rather than having to travel to Philadelphia for those procedures. And at that time, his pressure in his right eye was 21, and the patient also reported at that time that he was using Combigan 1-2 times per week rather than twice daily as prescribed by Dr. Ayers. The patient next saw Dr. Scheipel on June 11th of 2019 for additional removals of sutures, and again reported he was using Combigan only once or twice per week. His IOP continued to be 1 of 21 at that time. And Dr. Scheipel at that time discussed the importance of the patient complying with his medications for glaucoma, and he also removed some more sutures. The patient had subsequent appointments with Dr. Scheipel in August and November of 2019, and his prescriptions for prednisolone, the steroidal medication, was continued, and as well as the Combigan, the medication to reduce his eye pressure. Dr. Scheipel noted at that visit that the patient's binocular vision didn't meet the legal requirements for driving in Vermont, and that a cataract in his left eye was contributing to this impairment. So a follow-up appointment was scheduled to recheck the patient's pressure in his right eye, as well as to coordinate a surgery for the cataract in his left eye. In December of 2019, the patient again saw Dr. Scheipel for complaints about the cataract in his left eye, as well as difficulty seeing distance. And so Dr. Scheipel noted that the patient had stopped taking his Combigan, the pressure lowering drops in his right eye. And at that time, the pressure in his right eye had risen to 30. While he was meeting with Dr. Scheipel, the Combigan was administered, and the patient's IOP in his right eye was lowered to 24. And a follow-up appointment was scheduled to recheck his pressure in his right eye and continue planning for surgery for his left eye cataract. At the next appointment in December of 2019, the patient's pressure in his right eye was 16, and he was taking the pressure lowering medication and as well as the steroidal medication once per day for his right eye. The Dr. Scheifel changed that prescription from prednisolone to a different medication to reduce pressure called fluorometholone, and that was prescribed once a day. And at that time, his vision was noted to be 20/60 in his right eye. In December of 2019, December 31st of 2019, the patient called Dr. Scheifel and noted that he had had pain in his right eye for the past 3 days. And Dr. Scheifel saw him that day when he called. The patient, at the appointment, the patient reported that that he was not taking his pressure lowering medicine, that he was taking his pressure lowering medication, but he did not start the fluorometholone that Dr. Scheifel had prescribed, and he had also stopped taking the prednisolone. Dr. Scheifel noted that he was having rejection of the corneal transplant. Dr. Scheifel then consulted Dr. Ayers, and after doing so, increased the steroidal medication to treat the graft, the transplant rejection. The patient then followed up with Dr. Scheifel prior to his cataract surgery in the left eye in early January on 3 occasions in order to monitor his IOP and to his transplant in his right eye. Dr. Scheifel added dorzolamide to his right eye at the January 3rd, 2020 visit in order to further treat the pressure in his right eye. On January 20th of 2020, the patient saw Dr. Scheifel and complained about his right eye swelling during the previous 3 or 4 days. And at that encounter, Dr. Scheifel directed treatment by further tapering the steroidal medication and continuing to treat his pressure with prescriptions of Combogin and dorzolamide. He also advised the patient to use artificial teardrops and ointment. The patient's IOP at that time, the pressure was 15, and the patient decided at that visit to proceed with the cataract surgery in his left eye the next day. And so the patient had his surgery on the following day, on January 21st of 2020, and Dr. Scheifel placed an intraocular lens in his left eye. The patient was seen 2 days later for follow-up, and also on January 30th and February 7th of 2020, and for management of his left eye surgery as well as his right eye transplant and pressure. And at those appointments, his pressure was in his right eye was 14 and 18. And Dr. Scheifel continued to taper the steroidal medications during those visits. The patient's next visit was on February 26th of 2020, and was scheduled for February 26th of 2020. However, in the interim, the patient's wife had contacted Dr. Scheifel's office and informed that she had been diagnosed with cancer. And as a result, the patient rescheduled his appointment to March 5th of 2020. When at the patient's March 5th appointment, his right eye pressure had increased to 25, and Dr. Scheifel discussed with the patient balancing the care for the transplant rejection with the care for his elevated pressure and the risk of glaucoma. He continued the patient on pressure-lowering medications and continued tapering the steroidal medications. His next appointment was scheduled for April 3rd of 2020. And at that appointment, Dr. Scheipel and the patient discussed the frequency of the patient's future appointments given the onset of the pandemic. Although it seems like a long time ago, we can all remember that, the pandemic hit roughly in March of 2020. And so given the patient's wife's cancer diagnosis, he discussed with the patient how often the patient would come in, given the uncertainties of the pandemic and its potential effect on his wife's condition. So rather than continuing to taper the Durezol prescription and having more frequent appointments with Dr. Scheipel, the patient elected to continue taking the Durezol, and he would consider tapering off it at his next appointment, which was scheduled in August of 2020, about 4 months later. At that appointment, his pressure was 18. So when patient came to his next appointment on August 20th of 2020, he appeared and his pressure was 36. It had increased to 36, though he denied any changes to his vision. He did report seeing some shading in his vision and sunlight in his right eye. And Dr. Scheipel at that appointment, administered some of the pressure lowering medication, and it was able to reduce the pressure while he was in clinic. And then he continued tapering the Durezol prescription and scheduled another follow-up. At that follow-up on September 1st of 2020, the patient reported he had some decreased vision in his right eye since his last visit. His IOP was 17, and Dr. Scheipel continued to lower his medications at that visit. A few weeks later, on September 30th, the patient called Dr. Scheipel's office and noticed that he had been losing peripheral vision in his right eye over the course of the past month. Dr. Scheipel saw the patient the next day, and he complained of blurry vision, difficulty seeing distance, and poor peripheral vision. At that appointment, his pressure was 22, and Dr. Scheipel conducted a retinal nerve fiber layer, OCT, optical miss the word here, the optical chromatography test and a visual field acuity test. And what they showed was a thinning of the nerve fiber layer, as well as some visual field defects. His visual acuity at time was noted to be 20/60. Dr. Scheipel continued lowering his medications for that visit. And after he examined the patient, Dr. Scheipel referred him to a colleague, Dr. Jonathan Paul, who's a glaucoma specialist, because he was concerned that the medical management, that is the treatment of his eye with medication, might no longer be sufficient to treat his increasing intraocular pressure. And he thought that perhaps surgery may be necessary to address the patient's glaucoma. Dr. Paul saw the patient in October of 2020 and noted that the OCT test showed a thinning, global thinning in his right eye. He further noted at that time that his IOP on that day was 29, well above the ideal pressure target. And he noted that he added another drug, Dr. Paul did, to his right eye, latanoprost, to help lower his pressure, and scheduled a follow-up for 4 weeks. The patient decided after that visit to try a different medication to lower his pressure and follow up with Dr. Paul. And he concluded that if the medication wasn't successful in lowering the pressure, Dr. Paul advised him that the placement of a tube shunt may be necessary to address the issue. About this time, the patient ended his physician-patient relationship with Dr. Scheipel and continued to treat with Dr. Paul with only non-surgical medical management over multiple visits. The patient decided not to pursue surgery for the placement of a tube shunt. By March of 2021, the patient had further loss of vision in his right eye, and that was essentially the end of his treatment with Dr. Scheipel. And after considering the records, the opinion from an expert, as well as Dr. Scheipel's appearance before the committee determined, one, that some of the glaucomatous damage to the patient's right eye might have been ameliorated if Dr. Scheipel had recognized the progression of the glaucoma with vision field testing and repeated OCT tests, which you recall he performed in 2018, but then didn't do again for over 2 years. And had he done that, the committee determined that some of these changes may have been identified earlier and could have been treated more aggressively. Secondly, the committee noted that, although the patient was reluctant to schedule follow-up appointments with respondent between April and August of 2020 because of his spouse's illness in the pandemic, it was ultimately Dr. Scheipel's responsibility to ensure that the patient's IOP was properly monitored during this time. The committee concluded that if the respondent had monitored the patient's IOP during this time, he could have treated the patient's increasing pressure, and it may have prevented some vision loss. And finally, the committee determined that if respondent had referred the patient to a glaucoma specialist before the patient had reported significant field of vision loss, that too might also have prevented some vision loss. So after considering all of this information, the committee ultimately concluded that Dr. Scheipel's care did not meet the standard of care, and determined that an appropriate sanction for his conduct would be that within 1 year of approval of the stipulation, if approved by the board, of course, would be that Dr. Scheipel should successfully complete CME courses that address, one, the diagnosis and treatment of glaucoma, including interocular pressure, and secondly, to attend CME that addresses effective communication with patients, including documentation and record keeping. And secondly, the second